Welcome to I Hate It Here, the podcast for HR and people professionals, making the hardest job in the world just a little bit easier. I'm Hebba Youssef.
If you don't tell someone you don't like something that they're delivering, why would they quit? They may not even know that they're not doing a good job. To your question, how do you get employees to quit who are not doing a good job? First, you need to calibrate on, do they know they're not doing a good job? Then maybe they'll want to quit, or they'll find another job, or they'll do better, and then you may want to actually keep them because now they're all of a sudden delivering.
Don't let your employee experience become background noise. Instead, transform it into the backbone of your organization with First Step, the world's first and only intelligent communication platform. Over 500 organizations around the world, including 40 of the Fortune 100, rely on First Step to build stronger, more productive workforces. Visit firststep.io to learn more. Welcome back to another episode of the I Hate It Here podcast. I have spent a large portion of this quarter talking about retention and how to keep your employees in the newsletter and the podcast. But there's one thing I can't stop thinking about. What if you don't want to keep your employees? Now, I know this is counter to everything, but I thought it could be a fun episode where we talk about the flip side of the topic, because I've heard from a lot of leaders that they're finding themselves with some employees that they really don't want, but also don't really have a reason to get rid of. And especially in this environment when there are pensioned and tenured employees, what do you do? So I brought you a guest that I think we could have some fun digging into this topic. And this is his first interview in freedom. I don't know if I want to call it freedom. That sounds like you've been shackled. Freedom. Okay, let me just tell everyone who you are. I'm really excited he's here. By the way, I was fangirling so hard when you were like, yeah, I'd love to be on the podcast. I was like, mine podcast? Mine? So the person you hear laughing, Q. Q is a trusted advisor to founders, boards, C-suites, people executives, VC, the global accelerator programs like Techstar and People Tech Partners. He's a mission-driven, business-minded leader, public speaker, and executive coach with a focus on people strategy and business ops. He provides valuable insights and drives sustainable change from his extensive firsthand experience across his own startup, venture growth, private equity, management consulting, and Fortune 100 companies across 30 plus countries. Jesus, is there anything you have not done? Q, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me. It's been long overdue, and thanks for bearing with my crazy schedule. But as of now, I have a lot more availability, so I'm glad we could make it work.
Okay, so this is your first podcast since you've had a change in your life. Tell us what's been going on.
Yeah, so the recent change in my life is I transitioned from my full-time job as Chief People and Communications Officer at Paper. And now I'm basically focusing on things that, at least for the near term, for the next few months or through the summer, on things that really bring me joy, which is executive coaching, fractional advising, and really diving deeper into the rabbit hole that I started 6 months ago in the HR AI landscape. And more importantly, just connecting with people that I've not connected with for a while. Because as every chief people officer knows, the ride is rough. It's bumpy, it's hard, it's emotional, it's personal. So we're going to refocus on my health as well. That took a backseat for the last year on that front. So really excited to finally make this happen as well.
I'm so happy that you're taking a chance to focus on yourself, because I am the last person I focus on some days.
It's ironic, right? We often in our roles have to make sure that we are looking out for work-life balance, for the mental well-being, for the entire employee base, right? And I'm ashamed but humbled to accept the fact that I don't do it well for myself sometimes. You're so engraved in making sure the entire organization is in a good spot that you keep yourself last in line, which is not a good place to be in, but it's reality of what happens. So every now and then you got to find a sustainable way, which most of my career, that's what I've done, found a sustainable way to keep myself energized. Otherwise, if you break down, you're letting the rest of the organization down in terms of just mental capacity. But I'm excited this is, I think, the first real break in my entire career in 20 plus years. So trying to really do things like cook my own lunch, and that's actually happy, versus skipping lunch and not eating till 4:00 and realizing I'm starving. So definitely excited for that.
You just described my normal day, but it's interesting. I keep trying to, I try to tell myself, take care of myself, honestly.
Yeah, and here's a plug for you. Do take care of yourself, or think of what you could do, even if it's, I started in between taking one-on-ones on a walk which helped me just step out of the house because, as you know, I'm a remote work advocate. I think remote work and flexibility is the future, but it's also got a dark side to it, like everything in life. So there were weeks where I'd start at 4:30 a.m. and be working in my home office till 10 p.m. and I've not, my watch would be like, you've got 800 steps and you haven't seen fresh air. So I started doing that over the last few months. So definitely a call for all of us included to make sure that we check in on ourselves because life can fly by and the job is, it's probably the hardest, one of the hardest and loneliest jobs for anyone in our roles because often HR and people leaders, we often get a bad rep, right? Like we are the enforcers or we are delivering bad news because we are the conduits to deliver it. But the reality is, it's really hard to juggle taking care of an employer or an organization and the employees at the same time. And you can never win 100% of the time. So it's a balance that we have to do, often behind closed doors, right? Like we want to be transparent, but we can't share things that are critical to the employer or to the organization. But we have to do our part. So it's a tough job for sure. And I know you're living it still. So
I know, my God.
hats off to everyone that's doing it.
I have so many white hairs now. I keep joking that my best friend knows every single person I work with by name. Like, because she's the only person I can really call and be like, you'll never believe what so and so did today. Like, I can't do that with any current employee. Like, I'm not going to do that. So I call my best friend and I'm like, and she listens. Like, I'm very thankful that she actually listens. And she'll be like, what's so and so up to? Like, did they ever stop doing that thing you were complaining about? And it's like kind of funny now. She gets like a little TV sitcom.
It's like a drama for her. It's a sitcom version for her. I wish I could say the same. I tried that with my wife and initially it worked. And then she's like, I can't deal with this. Like I got my own problems. Like I don't have time for your sitcoms. Like deal with it and figure it out. And then you're like, all right, let me go find a GPT to talk to.
My breaking point with my partner was when he was like, hey, can I give you some advice on how the conversation went? And I was like, no, you cannot give me advice because you've not worked in HR and I don't want your feedback. And he was like, okay, I won't do that again. And I was like, never again. Like that is the line.
Yeah, it's hard. In hindsight, I guess it's hard to make that sitcom engaging for both sides because I'm sure they want to, help and give ideas. And
no, she loves it though. She gets everything. She knows everyone by name I work with. But okay, before we get too distracted, I have to ask you because I've been asking every single person this season. What is one thing a company could do that would make you want to quit?
I think the one thing that companies could do to make me want to quit is just not have a thoughtful communication plan and strategy, because then that very easily translates to they don't give a shit or they are not transparent or they don't know what they're doing. And I would say majority of times it's not because they don't know what they're doing. It's not because they don't want to share. It's not because they want to be hiding stuff. It's because they're just not being thoughtful about what they're saying and the messaging that comes across. And in a remote world, that's even more critical, right? Like when you're having all hands in a remote setting, what are you saying? So a very easy thing that would make me want to quit is just basically not having a thoughtful just not being thoughtful about how you message and communicate stuff, because that has so many ripple effects on trust, transparency, maturity, all sorts of things that makes you want to question, does a company really know what they're doing?
I've talked about it a lot, how I ended up I do all of our internal comms. Or a small startup. Like who else would do it, right? I don't have a comms person. But I feel like a lot of people have been forced into the comms role in the HR role and are left with like no resources where they're just like, write this internal comms and we're like doing our best. But also that's where I think like AI can be really helpful. It's like a good first draft. Usually I like AI draft the thing I'm going to say and then I interject what I would actually say. I really like that.
And then you can infuse things like core values and, you can bring it back to the messaging. I mean, you talk about a small company with internal comms. I think even larger companies, one of my learnings over the years has been how closely tied internal comms needs to be to the people function. In fact, I would go the mile to say, even if the company is large, internal comms can benefit a lot by sitting in the people function. So, for example, at Airbnb, the entire internal comms was part of HR. At Paper, I took on the internal comms function because everything is the art of authentic and honest storytelling. if you can explain, if you have a policy, an HR policy that you're rolling out, most people are like, what the hell are you doing? Like, I don't even understand what you're doing. But if you connect the dots and you explain why you did something, even if you won't win everyone over, which in the HR game is almost, never going to happen, at least you help them connect the dots, because most of it is rationalizing messaging. And then on the internal comms front, we have so many things hitting employees. It could be outside HR. Like, let's talk about, maybe you're going IPO and you have finance IPO readiness docs. You have, your standard data privacy, legal enforcing training that comes, all this stuff. If you can just have it come from one place, you can unify some of the messaging, you can combine them, it will just land on people better. So I'm actually a big advocate of internal comms being part of the people function, so that you can tell authentically and in an honest way the why behind what you're doing.
Yeah.
Because if you don't share the why, like, if people just are confused, and once they start going down that kind of mindset, then to my earlier point on your initial question, probably want to quit and get out of there.
Oh, that's such a good point. Okay, now on to what I really want to talk about today, which is, what do you do when when people aren't quitting and you're really trying to get them to quit? This is gonna be such a weird topic, because I really haven't talked about this, and I've just been thinking about it a lot lately, because I get this question. I got it 3 times in 1 week from different C-suite executives that I knew. They're like, "Hey, I have a bunch of employees, like, they're not really like engaged. I don't know what to do with them. How do I get them to leave?" And I'm like, "Ooh, that's not a question I like." But like, what would you say if someone was like, "Well, how do I get people to leave?"
I think it comes back down to really having the guts to have honest conversation. In other words, it comes down to being an effective leader and a manager. And a lot of times, leaders, managers don't want to be leaders and managers when it counts. They want to be leaders and managers when things are rosy and only give good news and not talk about the tough stuff. I read the saying like a decade ago that still stuck with me. I think it's somewhere probably in some Instagram feed I saw maybe a decade ago. But it was like, if you want to be liked by everyone, don't be a leader, go sell ice cream. Like, and that really stuck with me. So peeling it back to your question, I think the real thing you got to do is have honest conversation. So if you unpack why the individual is disengaged with the individual, like, part of it could be they're just not performing well, and that could have a multitude of layers under it. Maybe they don't have the right support, they've never done that role before, they're over their head, or they just, for lack of better words, are not good at their job, and you have to take some action. So if it's performance related, there are options to coach, support, mentor. And if that's not working, then have the direct conversation. I can't tell you how many individuals I've worked with, founders to senior leaders to managers in my executive coaching practice as well, do not want to give feedback because they don't know how to give feedback. Right. So if you don't tell someone you don't like something that they're delivering, why would they quit? They may not even know that they're not doing a good job. To your question, how do you get employees to quit who are not doing a good job? First, you need to calibrate on, do they know they're not doing a good job? Then maybe they'll want to quit, or they'll find another job, or they'll do better, and then you may want to actually keep them because now they're all of a sudden delivering. So I think it really comes down to unpacking why they're not doing well. Sometimes, and we all live this in our lives. It could be, I had an employee I know a couple of years ago was going through a very tough personal situation on the family front. Right? They didn't share it with us, and you could tell they were disengaged. You could tell like they were not themselves. And sometimes it's just like starting a one-on-one with, how are you? Or how are you doing it? Not forget the work, like, how are you? And it was sometimes when you can unpack that, that's how I ended up, they felt comfortable over time to share what was going on in their personal life. And that gave me a whole new perspective. It was like, please, like, take a few weeks off, like, deal with your personal situation. Did you know we have these types of leaves? Like, take a leave if you need to, like, help them really get to a better headspace. Because we as humans, if we're not in a good headspace, we're not going to be engaged, we're not going to work. So let's take another scenario as we unpack this. So one scenario is performance related. You have to figure out, coach them, put them in the right role, or performance manage them out through a hard conversation, which most managers don't want to have.
Never.
Second thing is unpacking. Maybe it's a personal driven trauma or something that's going on, or their own health that's not letting them be themselves, and giving them the space to recover from that and within reason. And then the third one is, let's just assume they are resting and vesting. That's a reality in a lot of post IPO situations too, right? Where they're just happy doing average work. they're resting, the job market's not good in tech, and they just don't want to leave. They get benefits. Why leave when they can do a mediocre job, which, by the way, you and me know in today's world is also potentially a scenario where they're doing side hustles more than their main job. So, that could translate to a number of ways. But let's just think of that. That still comes down to, if they are not on their game, having them understand why they're not on their game, right? And if they still don't leave, like the best way, and honestly the right way for an organization to have an employee leave, is by having the conversation. It's not working the roles, so you have to have the conversation. And they can almost be, and maybe I'm saying this out loud, so push me, and let's think through this and brainstorm it together. Like can there be a scenario where an employee is not performing, they're not doing well, and they are not leaving, and the company can do nothing about it? Is that really a scenario? Let's take US for an example. It's at will employment for the most situation. Like, you can always part ways, right? So I don't know. I think the onus is on the managers, the leaders, to really be real leaders in these times and step up and do what they can, to either turn it around or have the conversation and move on. There's another scenario where I've had people reporting to me that it's not the same scenario, in the sense where they're not doing a mediocre job, but they've actually left, and I've looked at it as a successful moment for me. That's basically like where you've groomed someone who's done well. The organization can only offer so much to that individual. I've been in that same scenario, even on the other side. And my boss has encouraged me to find a role at another organization that can continue to propel my career. And in that case, they've left. And yes, it's bittersweet, but you feel that sense of accomplishment. So in that example, like, you can actually encourage people to leave, not because of low performance, but because it's the right thing for their career, and the organization can only offer so much at such a point in time. So a bit of a tangent on your how you help them to leave, but
No, I loved it.
the why is very important in all of these.
Well, it comes back to that conversation. So many people are afraid to have these conversations at work.
Yeah.
I had to, like, a personal story of mine, like when my dad passed away in 2019.
I'm sorry, yeah.
Like, I've shared very openly, but thank you. But I was working with this manager, and she sat me down like 6 months after he passed away, and she was like, "Listen, I really care about you. I think you are going to be super successful. You're so smart. You just, like, aren't taking care of yourself. And I can see, like, the grief weighing on you, and I see how it's showing up in your work, and I really care about you. And I want you to stay here and do good work. But I'm worried if you don't go and take care of yourself, that you're never going to be able to, like, be the star that I think you can be." And she was like, "I need you to go take care of yourself." And she like basically encouraged me to go to therapy, which I went to for the first time in my life a week later.
Nice.
And within 6 months to a year, I was being promoted.
That's awesome.
And had she not sat me down and looked at me and been like, "This is going to be a hard conversation. You are not performing like the way I know you can. You're dealing with something so personal, so tough. So I need to help you take care of yourself so that you can come to work and, like, be great, because I think you can be." But, like, I think of, like, if she had wussed out and not had that conversation, she probably would have fired me.
Yeah.
And I would have never thought she believed in me,
That's the definition of a good leader, right? A good leader is not someone that gives up and just says, "All right, let's call HR and get rid of the person," right? Because that's also sometimes what happens. It's really caring and helping understand why the individual is in that situation. And it doesn't always work, right? You could try the why. You could try, again, thankfully in your situation, you took her up. You recognized what she was saying from a place of trust, and then you took it upon yourself to take action on that. That doesn't always happen, right? So it's easier said that it'll always work. So you have to give it a shot, is my point, because if leaders cannot help individuals grow when times are not all going to the moon and rocket ship, that's not even the definition of leadership. Leadership to me is when you are in the tough times, you are helping, no matter what the situation is, helping people get through it, helping organizations get through work. And I think sometimes people are just, they want the easy route. A lot of it is egos, right? If you're talking about executives, founders, whatever the case may be, they don't want to show that they have that empathy. They want to be empathetic. This is the irony, right? Everyone wants to be empathetic and care, but they don't want to be vulnerable. And sometimes you can't do one without the other. Like, you have to, in your situation, like, or any situation, like you have to be vulnerable to hear what they're saying, share your own personal story if it's relevant at that point, so that the person can actually connect and take action. But they want to be macho, right? They want to be, I'm the leader that has had no hardships in my life, and I'm an Iron Man or Iron Woman. And it all comes down to the definition of leadership, good leadership. And part of that is having a candid and honest communication channel.
And also being empathetic and vulnerable. Like we throw around the word empathy so much. We're like, everyone should have empathy and empathy. And like, I have a lot of empathy for people. Okay. Even I'm a victim of saying I have a lot of empathy for people.
We all
but
are,
like,
yeah.
But leaders, I think like leaders, especially if you are a leader and you're thinking about yourself first and not your team, I think you shouldn't be a leader.
Yeah,
There's so many people that become managers and leaders for the wrong reason. Or like a lot of these first time founders were just people with really good ideas that like maybe didn't realize like, I now have to take this idea and also be this great leader that brings this idea into fruition. And no one teaches, who's teaching that course?
It's so personal, right? So, I've been thankful to have strong, good leaders who've put me in check, similar to your example on either like you're getting way over your head and you're not going to be successful, like pull it back, or even on the professional front, refocus, figure those out. That I've grown to be a leader that wants to do the same thing for my team, because in a way it's giving back. In a way, it's like if I didn't get those checkpoints, I would have probably been off the rails. So it's so personal because, or it's so also exponentially from a network effect standpoint, that a good leader, if you are a good leader and you are just a good human being, forget leader, like having conversation, like connecting with people, it can give back in so many indirect ways through the people you coach and
So
give
many.
back. It has a lasting impact. I know it's had it on me. It's probably had it on you and the people we've
Definitely.
worked with. I'm sure we do the same thing.
I hear from so many people. Like I still talk to people I've hired and I've kept in touch with them for so long, and it's just been interesting. They still come to me for things, and they're like, "What do you think about this? And what should I do here?" And it's funny because my friends are like, "Isn't that exhausting? Like you always have all these people reaching out to you." And I'm like, I cared about them, and they saw me as a leader, and like the fact that they trusted me with that responsibility, and still to this day trust me. It's like an honor to me. I'm like, yeah.
It feeds both ways, right? Like to your point, like it feeds me when I, every now and then I'll get a ping from someone who worked for me like 7-8 years ago. They'll catch up and just tell me everything that's going on and wanted some advice on which way to go, or even a reference for their next job. It's fulfilling for me as well, right? Because it gives you that, okay, like you did some good, and you're seeing it on the other end as well.
Employees receive an average of 120 messages throughout their day. That can contribute to rising burnout and plummeting productivity. Cut that noise by up to 75% with First Step. First Step helps HR and communication teams deliver personalized communications at scale in a matter of minutes, so that everyone, from your knowledge workers to your frontline workers, have the resources they need right at their fingertips. It's time to put your employees first. Visit firststep.io to learn more.
So wait, so did we answer your question? Your question was,
Oh my God,
repeat your question again, because I kind of went into so many tangents.
I think we actually did a great job, and whoever's listening to this knows I also go on tangents all the time. I went on an AI tangent the other day.
This
and I was
might be a multi-hour podcast then with both of us.
We could just have a podcast called Tangents where you and I just go, we start on one topic and then we end up like 15 steps ahead on a different topic. I would love that. That'd be so much fun. Honestly, whoever's listening to this, they love it. They know I'm always all over the place like this. You did answer my question. We talked a little bit about how managers can approach these difficult conversations and like the role of a leader plays and empathy and vulnerability. Like we touched on it all.
Got it.
I think the next thing I want to talk about though is any potential risks to telling an employee, encouraging them to leave. Because there are benefits. I think we can talk benefits and risk, but like in your mind, if you're in a situation, are you like, oh, what risk are you thinking about when doing this?
I mean, the risks there could be, but they can be mitigated. So let me explain. So if an employee is not doing well and there's just no turning around, let's just say you've tried to turn it around, one of the things that companies I worked at that we've implemented is kind of the PIP or package philosophy. Right. Mm-hmm. So, you've got to a point where it's just not working. Rather than spending a lot of time for both sides and probably for not a good ROI, or lack of interest from the employee of really wanting to turn it around, working through a package scenario that basically gives them the soft landing and mitigates your risk on either side. This is why HR business partnership is also critical, right? Bringing HR in early in the game versus when it's got to the point you don't know what to do and then you're backtracking and trying to figure it out. I don't think there's any significant risk, especially with the mindset of if it's not going to work, we will
It's not gonna,
do this professionally. We're adults, do it in an amicable way. If you've not done anything crazy wrong, like malpractice or something, let's just figure out how to land that because it's not working. I can't think of any big risks, as from that standpoint. What about you? Any risks that you can think of?
I love that you mentioned involving your HRBP because they're like the smartest people on all these things. You really want them to tell you if there is any risk, but I don't really think there is. If it's not going to work, it's like trying to make a broken relationship work.
Yeah.
I've been using a lot of relationship dating metaphors lately. I don't know why. Sorry. But like it's like really, it's the thought of like the I can change him mindset.
I've been married almost 10 years, so I guess I haven't got
You've
those.
dated in the modern age because it's real dark out there. It's real dark out there.
I'm sure.
But that's like I don't think there's any risk, honestly. Like I think if you do it in a very professional, respectful manner, I mean, if you roll in and you're like, hey, I really think you should quit. Like that's just disrespectful and definitely could open you up to risk. Yeah. But I think if you go talk to the person and have a real conversation, like, I don't think it's going to work for you here. And I care about you as a person and I want you to be successful. And I don't think you can be successful here, but that doesn't mean I don't believe that you can be successful in other environments.
You're right. I think the risk really exists when you be a jackass and don't treat it with respect. When you don't do it with respect, right? Like we've seen we are unprepared. We've seen all sorts of from TikToks to articles about, them doing it on Zoom or you heard of folks where they just like tell them and cut their or don't even tell them, cut their access while they're on an overseas trip. I forget which company it was last year that did that. So when you act unprofessionally, there is a risk of your reputation. And in all honesty, that is warranted. I think that you deserve that in that context because how you treat people when things do not work well in a professional way or in life, when things don't work out, how you treat people, how you treat each other is what really matters in the long run to your reputation, to who you are, how you sleep at night. Some people can sleep at night even if they don't do it in the most ethical way, but their reputation will catch up with them on that as well. Yeah. So, you do good, you get good. You do bad, then you have a bigger risk because you've kind of lost all your cards that you could play at that point to mitigate the risk as well.
Okay, what about companies that want to provide resources for employees that are considering leaving? Have you seen any company do this? That's like, hey, if you want to leave, here's what we could do.
Yeah, so there are companies. I don't know if, I know there's companies that I've had. I was just talking to one yesterday that was trying to figure this out, which was, or they offer voluntary opt-out packages. So it's in the world where we live in today, where workforce and headcount planning is pretty restricted, and the world of layoffs, that we've been living in for the last year, especially in tech, companies that know individuals that are not necessarily performing, they're offering voluntary opt-out packages, meaning you can leave and here's your package, right? So that's something that's hard to quantify because you may have people that you don't want to leave, but they offer that. I feel like it was maybe 5 or 7 years ago. I don't know if it's still a practice. Was it Netflix or Zappos that basically always had this, like, if you want to quit, we will give you $5,000 to quit. Because they just did not want people that were not engaged and hung on to an organization.
I think Netflix did that.
Netflix, right? Yeah, that's what I don't know if they still do it, and I love that because it was like, like you don't want to be here. We respect that. And let's give you a little parting gift so you can take some breather, or it's an incentive at the end of the day. So yeah, I've seen those kind of, I guess in the world of layoffs, it's more like, do you want to opt out? Then take a package and go, which is a different variation of Netflix way back in the day when things were good.
This is so awful. I probably should not disclose this, but I'm going to. So here we go. I had so many friends at big tech companies like Facebook, Google, who every time they would do a layoff, they'd be like, God, I hope I'm included. I hope I'm included. And I would be like, if you want to be laid off, why wouldn't you just leave? And they're like, oh, well, I want the layoff package. Mm-hmm. And then I'll leave.
Yeah.
And I'm like, but if you're already thinking to yourself, God, I hope I'm being laid off. Like, do you not think maybe you should probably go work somewhere else? Maybe. I mean, I know the job market's hard right now. And so I'm not going to say that so flippantly. Like, I know the job market's hard. I have a ton of empathy for people in the market right now because it's rough. But
Yeah, the tech market is, I think the flip side is the macroeconomic condition, right? When there's not a lot of options, you know that the package, especially at these big FAANG companies, is going to be very, very healthy, which gives you a good runway to just figure stuff out or take your time to find something else. Can't blame them, right? Like, why just wait? I mean, now, if you're a researcher at OpenAI or at Google and you're going to some AI company, like, yeah, they don't even need to think twice because they can get, multi-million-dollar packages right off the bat if they're not happy. So it always is in relation to what's going on in the market. But I think optional opt-in voluntarily leaving packages are a way that companies can incentivize. The trick there is you will have people that you don't want to leave opt for those packages. And then what do you do, right? I constantly talk to people about that. Like, what should we do? Because what if we have, and my philosophy is like, those people were probably going to leave anyways in the next 3 months,
100%.
right? So
They're
just
go.
because you didn't give them a package doesn't mean, it does mean they're not leaving today, but they will leave as soon as they find something that they like. And in that interim,
Absolutely.
one could argue like they're, I don't want to say checked out, but they're not as motivated and engaged, which is why they're thinking of leaving in the first place. So that's, I guess, the modern age of the Netflix giving 5K is give a package to opt out. You reduce your headcount, you reduce your operating cost, which is what everyone's facing a lot of pressure on anyways. And to be honest, with tools like AI that are rapidly evolving every single day, we can do more with less, right? So you will need less, you will need different size teams now. So I think organizations might shrink over time because of the fact that you can do more with less, but I think there will be a lot more organizations popping up, right? Because you can have a 10-person organization doing what a 200-person organization needed to do 5-8 years ago without all the tools and technology.
Are you still hearing from people that there's a big focus on reducing operating costs?
Yeah, no.
I know that was the last year and a half. That was all I could hear about.
I would say at least I would say it's in tech for sure, between a lot of the VC-backed companies getting humbled in the last year with, having crazy valuations 2-3 years ago. But then even if it's not VC-backed, from the Metas of the world, you've seen them go, Googles of the world, you've seen them really through their earnings calls and through their projections really focus on really operationalizing the overall overhead and cost. So I think it's across the board in tech. Now, I'm not as close to, for example, manufacturing and, the other sectors like healthcare to know, but I would bet, if I have to take a guess, that it is exist in every single sector in some form because of AI. Because the way AI is disrupting how much you can do, just think of translations or think of anything that AI is doing today that you needed manpower for. A lot of it can be done more efficiently. So I would say it's all over. The thing that really hits a chord with me is, so if you take Metas of the world or Googles of the world that are focusing on operating costs, are they really giving up on innovation to some extent to prioritize operating costs? Because when you focus on innovation, you have to pump in a lot in R&D. That's how you innovate, right?
Yep.
You want to take bets, you want to take long tail research projects to make breakthroughs that probably won't give you revenue right away. So what I would be curious on as we think out loud is R&D being cut at these companies? Because if R&D is being cut to reduce operating costs because it's not directly revenue generating, then only over the long term we'll be able to tell, is innovation taking a relative backseat to what it was before? So that'll be interesting.
Yeah.
You just gave me an idea. I might geek out over this over the next week and try to pull out some data and see what's going on.
Please. And then we record podcast part 2.
Yeah.
Tangents with Hebba and Q. Tangents is a great name.
Yeah,
I'm just
Tangents
saying.
is,
Everyone here's addicted. Someone's going to ask for it. Someone's going to write in and be like, can you all please do a Tangents episode every
I'm
quarter?
down. I've got the capacity now, so we can definitely make something work.
And I definitely have an ADHD. I know I do. I just the way that my brain and I
never been diagnosed, so I don't know if I have it, but I really have a hard time focusing on one thing for long. So
Me too. Well, we can work on it together, but not on tangents. That's the episode where we can do whatever we want. I think I love the idea of giving the opt out. Back to the question about, are there resources people can give to encourage employees to leave? The second thing I think that costs no money is having a really clear career path or leveling map that you can show the employees and be like, there's not a next step here. Like, I think like if you lay out a map to the employees and you're like, hey, there are going to be no promotions in 2 years. We're going to stay a relatively flat organization. There might not be a next step for you. Like, and I want your career to continue to grow. And it comes back to that beginning conversation. So I think you should explore something else. I think like having really clear leveling is super powerful.
Leveling is kind of foundational. So agree with that on just having that as a baseline. I think companies have tried various things, right? Like there was some, I don't know if it was Microsoft a year or two ago, but there were companies that said we are not giving raises this year at all, right? Because the conditions were tough. There were companies that took away bonuses. There were companies that said no promotions are frozen for the next year or two. There are companies that, are saying come back to the office. Was it Walmart last week?
Dell.
Dell said you won't get promoted if you don't.
Dell said you won't get promoted if you don't come to the office, which is so wild. I'm like, get out.
I think it was Walmart a week or two ago I read where they're telling people move to Arkansas or you get laid off or quit. So there are companies that are trying, I guess we could give them +1 for creativity, not necessarily authentic, not necessarily doing it in good spirit, but it's creative where they're trying to leverage whatever things they have to basically give people indicators that they should leave, right? To your point, the reality is just, will that really work when the market's really slow and people, want to wait out? So then you got to figure out, what's that next step.
Do you have any top of mind stories or case studies that when employees have been encouraged to leave, that it actually was positive for both the individual and the company, either like personal, professional? I don't know why I said personal, professional. It obviously
I was going to say, like, I'm not been in a relationship where I've been in. Maybe we could go on that tangent, on the tangent show, because I'm sure there's probably cases where I was encouraged to leave. I'll have to reminisce. But let's bring it back for this particular show. So, so I would give my own personal example. So I was at this company way back called the Warranty Group. I was there for 4 years. It was my first endeavor in the HR profession because I switched to HR midway through my career. And I'd been there for 4 years. I'd done every single role in the company because we were a couple 400-ish people, I think, when we started and grew over 4 years. Oh, yeah. So essentially, there was no other role for me to do in HR. I was the head of global people ops, but I'd done all the other roles. We had an amazing chief people officer who was my mentor and someone I still look up to till today. And, I was in that space where after 4 years, I had to choose. Do I just sit where I am, enjoy my role, but don't want to grow necessarily from a learning perspective? And I remember talking to my boss at the time, and I said, I was in Chicago this whole time, and I wanted to make it out to the Silicon Valley. I wanted to live the dream. And I looked for job opportunities, and I found a opening at Jones Long LaSalle JLL, which was a massive 50,000 person company. My team would be 64 people or 60-ish people. And it was one where he told me, like, if I want to break out into the Silicon Valley, I need to first break out of financial services, which is what I'd worked in for a decade. So go seek another industry and seek a broader, bigger role as a people leader, both for experience and credibility. And when I left, I actually, he helped me evaluate the offer, my new offer. And this is what I still do for people that I work with. I tell them, like, at a point where you need to tell me, like, if you want more, because it's all a balance, right? Sometimes, I look at it, it's literally, if you look at a weighing scale on personal and professional, the older I get or more, hopefully, wiser I get with age, I realize that it's all about balancing, right? There's seasons. There's a season where you just want, like, which has been most of my career, which is everything on the professional side, and it can come at a cost of personal. Now I'm starting to get more even. So my point here is that it's totally fine, like, if someone has a lot going on their personal side, to ride it out for a few years on the professional side. That's okay. That's not wrong. But if you want something more, and an organization will always reach a point where it cannot give you everything you want. right? Because you've outgrown it. The career framework is there. So that was my personal story. And I broke out, went to JLL, and guess what? I left after 11 months at JLL, the shortest I've ever stayed at a company in my whole career, because Airbnb gave me the dream opportunity to relocate to San Francisco, be their first global people ops leader. And I stayed there for 5 years. So these steps along the way, like this one, where I was encouraged to leave, I would say, only because I was pushing because I wanted to do so much more and the organization could not give me. So it's always a two-way street, but that's something that still stays with me till today. And I'm thankful that, someone helped me look out for what I wanted versus what the company wanted. Because sometimes those are two different things.
It feels like breaking up with a company is always messy. And I wish employees would just I don't know, maybe assume positive intent. Like, assume I'm not trying to fire you all the time, that I'm genuinely curious. Like, are you happy here and fulfilled by your work? Because if you're not, maybe there could be something else better out there for you. We're just I feel like people think we're the enemy. They're like, oh, she's asking me if I'm fulfilled. I have to say yes, because I could lose my job. And I'm like, I just want you to be, I just want to know if you're happy. Like, honestly, do you like this work?
I think it also is more tolerable if it's coming from a place of trust that's already been established. There's a reality in these situations, which is the power play reality, right? Which is, let's just say a founder or a senior executive asks someone, how are you doing? Are you fulfilled? If they give an answer, and I'm sure there are examples of this all over the place, where if you say you're not fulfilled, you're not really enjoying it, their egos get stroked and they're like, this person's not along for the ride. They're not ride or die. We need to, exactly.
They're
Yeah,
not on
the
the
bus. I hate that.
That Frank salute. I
the
hate
bus
that
or the
so
boat.
much.
So there's precedence,
The
is what I'm saying,
bus.
for people to feel like that. But you have to build that trust, and you have to genuinely care about what the individual wants, because which may be in a lot of cases beyond what the company can offer. And sometimes that's hard to digest for folks, right? They think that even if you ask what you want and you tell them you're not fulfilled, they think they can just always make it work in the company, right? Like offer you more money or give you a retention bonus, give you all those. Like I've done it, and I do, and I'm not anti giving any of those programs, but they are band-aid fixes. They are not long-term fixes, right? Like you offer someone more cash because they were going to leave. I can almost guarantee you in 6 months they're going to leave when they find something, right? So it's egos.
I hate retention bonuses.
Yeah, that's probably a separate topic.
I have a vendetta.
I've obviously implemented them a bunch of times because there are situations where you need them, but I would say they almost never work in the long run, right? But you got to work through that. But so it comes down to, I think, egos, how people want to react when people are opening up to them, right? Because there are plenty of people that ask for that vulnerability, but then don't want to give it back in return.
No, you can't be empathetic and not be vulnerable, as we have said earlier in the episode. Okay, we've come full circle. Now, I guess for all the I Hate It Here listeners who are just getting to know you, what's the best way to get in touch with you? How can they find you and stalk you?
Yeah, so the easiest way to go get in touch with me is through LinkedIn, Q Hamirani, or my website, which is hamirani.com. And either of those places should take you to me.
Wait, and tell us a little bit about the AI HR community.
So I have a community that I started. It's called People GPT, and you can join it at thepeoplegpt.com. And it's really just a community of anyone that's at the intersection of HR and AI and wants to have a conversation about what's going on in that space. It's for folks who've never had a conversation about AI to folks that are geeking out about it. I found myself going into a rabbit hole in November when the GPTs came out, started building LLMs, and I basically realized that I wanted a safe space just to geek out with folks, which is how I started it. And it kind of became bigger than I imagined. So really, it's a space where we just want to have a conversation, and we want to bring everyone in the people profession along together. Because honestly, in this particular revolution, if you want to call it that, if we as people and HR leaders don't understand the impacts of AI, we don't need to understand the technical details. But if we don't understand what the implications and impacts could be, we probably will be out of a profession, forget a job in the near future, because we have to be able to support our organizations. And if we don't even know what they might be going through, it's going to be a tough one. So that's started it in November, December, and it's going pretty strong. So thanks for reminding me about that as well.
Amazing. I mean, I think I got in there and then I really need to spend some more time in there because I too am fascinated by AI and like what's going to happen to HR in all of this. Because everyone keeps joking, like, are you worried AI is going to take your job? And I'm like, my job? Go for
I
it.
don't even
Like, good luck. I don't think AI wants my job. I think AI is like people.
I mean,
no.
There's
Too
things that AI cannot replace. There's things like in-person connection. There's things like judgment. There's things like critical thinking. Now, can humans and machines coexist? Hell yeah. And that will be a world that we live in that will supercharge our creativity. Can AI take some jobs and automate it?
Yeah.
Please do. Like, none of us want those, to be sitting and posting recs in Workday, for example. Go automate that so we can do more high power, improve our own cognitive load and ability. So, yeah, I don't think AI is just going to supercharge our creativity, and it's not going to replace in-person or things like human connections. So no tool will do that, is my view as well.
That's an amazing place to end this episode. Thank you so much for joining me. We need to do part 2 on AI.
Yes.
We will do that. And tangents, because I feel like tangents could be a really fun episode.
It could, and it could be just like a mini segment or something, just 15-minute tangents every few weeks or something.
My tangents are like an hour long, so 15 minutes is gracious. Thank you.
Well, I heard you have a really good audio team, so I think they can clip it.
Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in. Keep up with all the latest HR resources by subscribing on Apple, Spotify, Google, or wherever you listen. And if you love I Hate It Here, tell an HR friend. I'll see you next time.